All right, everybody, we are here back with another fantastic, exhilarating episode of Dark Bites, this time with author and a good friend of mine and a good friend of the show, Kit Daven. How you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing pretty good. Thanks for having me, Rick. I'm actually
Absolutely.
excited to be on your show finally. That's what's
I
great.
know, right? Like we met at a local signing that you were doing. We've been friends ever since. That was before the dark ages, I guess, before
Yeah.
COVID got us all, and I'm surprised it's taken me this long to get you on my show. So
Oh, yeah, yeah. And we keep talking about doing like episodes where we'll discuss something like related, and we never do. So I don't know. Maybe
I
that'll
know.
happen. Maybe it won't.
Well, one of the things that I love about the thing that we're going to talk about a lot today is Halloween. Is that Halloween I find has a habit of bringing the best kind of people together. So thank you for writing your book about Halloween. Every day is Halloween. It's much like to think that you wrote this just so we could have an excuse to be on my podcast and chat about it. I'm sure you didn't, but
Exactly the reason why I wrote this.
well, thank you for doing that. So, this is a fantastic book. So obviously I'll put the link down below so people can go ahead and buy that as well. So the really cool thing about this, when you first told me that you're working on the book, I knew I would like it because, of course, even though you do have a fantasy trilogy, what is the name of it? So I don't screw it up on you.
It's called I can't even say it. A to C trilogy. Because I was under the impression I might write a sequel trilogy call that one another Z to C trilogy. But I decided I'm probably not going to do that. But yeah, it goes back to a blend of fantasy, science fiction, and horror. So
Cool. And then I guess through some prompting or some inspiration, and the reason that I kind of found you as well is because you ended up writing a book. Oh my God, I'm going to embarrass myself here. I'm going to post it up here as well because I couldn't find it on my shelf. The Murder on Mannequin Row.
the arrest on Mannequin Row.
Thank you. The Arrest on Mannequin Row. I know there's some death going on in there, and I keep wanting to call it the murder.
Yeah, Mannequin Row. I wrote the book and I didn't even get to talk about it.
You know what's funny? I was doing just a quick aside here, and then I want to talk a little bit more about what my point was going to be. Is I was recently on a podcast for nonfiction, and I was sitting beside people that were much smarter and more talented than I am. I've got, somebody that just got nominated for a Bram Stoker Award over here. I've got friggin' Victoria Price down at the end of it here. So I feel like I'm in fantastic company, and they got to me to announce kind of what I do. And I had a new book come out, The Reviewer's Guide to Writing Book Reviews and How to Get Paid for Them. Of course,
Right.
now I can say it, but I completely botched my own title, and I just kind of trailed off at the end and said it quietly so people would just think that I'm just maybe got something dust in my throat or something. I'm like, yeah, I wrote a book, but don't ask me what the heck it was. So yeah, so that was embarrassing, but hey,
I don't know if this is something that happens to other writers, but I know that when I work, and it may be because I'm a little bit neurodivergent, when I work on a project, I work on it deeply and intensely. When I finish, go. And when I let it go, things about the book start to fade away.
right.
So, and sometimes it's names of characters, sometimes it's the title, and it's just like unless I'm actively talking about it all the time, it's just gonna go. It's still locked in my mind, but the memory recall is just not there. Right.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I find exactly the same thing too. And even books that I read, I mean, I'm a reviewer. Sometimes there are certain things for whatever reason completely stand out to me months after I've written it, or read it, I should say, rather. Maybe it's because sometimes it takes me that long to get to writing the review, so it's always in the back of my mind until I'm done. But then, yeah, I guess it's just maybe that hyper focus where you're either all in or you're all out, and you're kind of rechanneling all that hyper focus. So. But the nice thing though, and the kind of where we, ended up meeting is, a friend of ours, Safara Jaran, she edited that book for you, and she posted up, speaking of cat holes, there's one. So she edited that book and did a shout out for you. So I went and checked it out, and I grabbed your Arrest on Mannequin Row. You had a couple of other chapbooks there as well. The Cannibal's Guidebook. And thank you. Yep. Sorry. Don't mind my kitty cat. Everything's about her. And then pardon me?
Spider Spun.
In Spider, thank you, in Spider Spun. So, which were both fantastic books. And so I knew that you could write horror, but so I knew that when I heard, and that's my point, I guess, I'm trying to get to, is when you wrote told me you wrote a book about Halloween, I knew that you would write it well. But at the same time, I thought, there's so many books out there about Halloween. What's going to make this one kind of stand out? I knew that you have your own unique voice, but boy, like this is a really cool, very unique spin on the whole idea of every day being Halloween, where you think it's all fun and games and it's great, we dress up and play make-believe kind of thing. And there are some aspects of that in this book, but it's not exactly fun and games. So before I get too much into it, what was your inspiration? Maybe you can tell everybody a little bit about, kind of what the initial seed for this was and what your goal was in writing it as far as the takeaway.
Well, last year in the early spring, a friend of mine, fellow writer Jen Frankel, secured me a spot in another author's blog Halloween series that she does every year called 13 Horrifically Silly Days of Halloween. It's hosted by Reagan McCauley. And she got me a spot in there. And I reached out to Reagan and she said, yeah, I'll hold a spot for you for a short story to publish later in the year. So, it was about May, I think, when I started trying to figure out what story that was going to be. And I had something that was partially written. And I pulled that out and I thought, yeah, this will make a good short story. It'll be nice and creepy and stuff like that. Problem with it is it wasn't creepy. And I didn't know where it was going. It was just stalling out. And I went out with a walk with my husband, Sean, and I asked him, I might have to scrap this story. I really want to write something about Halloween. I've never written a story about Halloween. But it's got to be fun, it's got to be quirky, and it's got to be horror. It's got to be gruesome, And the first thing that came out of his mouth was, every day is Halloween. And I'm like, huh? And he goes, the Ministry song. And I'm like, oh yeah, an oldie but a goodie. So as soon as we got home, I sat down at the computer and I pulled up the video on YouTube for Every Day is Halloween by the Ministry. And I had a listen and I pulled up the lyrics and I was studying the lyrics. And I thought, I can do this. I can do a story about Halloween and this is where I took the song and just gently twisted it. Because in the song, you have someone who is dressing like the monsters in the world that he lives in to get through. Yeah. And just to survive, right? And I like that subverting of Halloween, because generally Halloween is a time to act out the shadow sides of our aspect, like of our psyche, right? Whereas this is a different type of masking. And I'm like, I can write about that. I have life experience when it comes to masking for survival, because of being different, just being a little bit different up here, with the way I see things and the way I process things, and also with the way what I value as well, right, out of life, which is not something I'm going to go into here, but it's just been something I'm been aware of, and it's been something my closest friends have been aware of. And I'm like, yeah, I can write from experience. I can do this. And that's what I did. And that's how the short story started. And oddly enough, it started with tulips, and I really, really don't know where that came from. But it was that impulse, and I just started with the tulips and went from there.
Yeah, and that's what I thought was super cool in this too, because for some of the characters that you have, I mean, essentially it's about the dead coming back to life and trying to coexist with everybody. They're sort of, they don't really pose necessarily, and at least initially, without giving too much of it away, they don't necessarily pose a threat, but they pose a possibility of a threat, and they're always kind of just looming in the background. They're watching everybody. So it's almost like they're keeping to themselves in a sense. And of course, the idea with the whole everyday being Halloween is, in order to fit in with them so that you can stave off any potential threat, is they have to dress up in Halloween, so they kind of look like one of the dead. And although there's certainly some obvious tie-ins with with the zombie canon, talking about the tulips, I mean, you have flowers that that can come back to life if they're giving last rites, which I thought was just an awesome thing. Normally, and I find that's what I love about this book too, is that there's just a lot of really cool juxtaposition where you've got things that are really contrasting with each other. So obviously, generally speaking, last rites are giving to somebody to sort of send them on their way and to provide them peace. This does the absolute opposite, where it kind of brings them back and forces them to cling on to life after death, or death after life, kind of a mix and match kind of thing. Was thinking about the tulips, is that always what you sort of had in mind? Was that done intentionally to have those sort of opposing factors going on?
Originally, the tulips, to me, just to give some context about the story, is that the story starts in spring. And I thought it would be a really nice contrast to start a Halloween story in spring and have it end on Halloween, in the month of Halloween. But eventually I did that and then went a month beyond. So it ends in November, right? Yeah. But originally those flowers were, when I think about spring and what's so representative of life, the vibrancy that comes with flowers when they first come out in spring after a long winter, I thought she needs to be cutting the heads off those to appease the dead, because the dead are basically offended by anything that presents as living, right? And that's one of the reasons why people who are alive are going around wearing costumes all the time, and why it becomes law. It's a act of safety. There's actually laws in effect, and that people have to wear costumes every day if they go out in public. And I think that particular thing is what took that premise and made it a little bit different from everything else about Halloween.
I mean, it really is such a unique take on this, and maybe for some people, but they might think of Halloween as being terrifying and scary and whatnot. But of course, horror lovers, for people like you and I, and I think majority of people watching this, comment down below if I'm wrong and you're just you just tripped across this podcast and Halloween is freakishly terrifying for you, and that's okay. We as a Halloween lover, we love to scare people. But I think for a lot of us, it's comforting. Like you said, we get to put on the mask, we get to represent our shadow self in a sense. But there's also a lot of fun with that too. However, with this book, there's not a whole lot of fun necessarily going on. And I thought that you did an awesome job of having that consistent tone throughout of it, where there's certainly some hope in there. There's some we see a collaboration in a sense between the living and the dead, but at the same time, thanks to your primary character in this, Esther, there's also just a sense of loaning and sadness that kind of carries through it all. In a sense, she just wants to sort of be her own person. She wants to kind of put the mask on and kind of blend in with everybody, but she's also desperate to be noticed, which, even as I'm saying that, maybe people watching this like, well, that doesn't make sense. Like, pick a lane, lady. Do you want to be noticed? Do you want to stand out? Do you want to, be your own shell?
Well, it's difficult, especially because Esther is 15, and it's difficult at that age. And I felt for her, because I was that teenager who wanted to be out there, but didn't want to deal with the repercussions of being in the spotlight all the time. And then also appreciated being able to withdraw and be a wallflower, even if it meant nobody noticed you. And there's a reason why I dedicated the book the way I did, and I don't know if you noticed, but it's dedicated to anyone struggling to be seen.
Yes.
Right. But the story, I found, gave me an opportunity to talk about and explore a type of masking that we don't normally talk about in society. Because when it comes to Halloween, usually the masking that we do at Halloween is more of a masquerade style of masking, where we step into a role that isn't usually ourselves. We get a break from being ourselves to be something else for a while. This is another type of masking. This is the kind of masking where you have to hide who you are, because if you don't, you will be hurt. And in this instance, in the book, there's an escalation happening with the dead against the living, and that hurting, the fear of being hurt is now becoming a fear of being killed, right?
Yeah.
And that's a different type of masking, and that is actually kind of ties into people who are dealing with autism, or I don't know what other types of neurodivergent names, or you want to call it.
Sure.
But these are people who have to hide something about themselves, because if they don't, they'll be bullied or something of that nature, right? And so that this story gave me an opportunity to explore that, and to kind of go into a character who is ambivalent about stepping out into the world and being seen, and kind of enjoying the safety of being in the shadows of her mask, you know.
Yeah, no, really well put. And I think there's certainly safety in a good community. And I think a lot of just being happy in general is all about finding your people. Mm-hmm. And certainly I do have a lot of people in that, in that community, as well as just neurodivergent people as well, that have a lot of, as my partner likes to call it, that has the tisms, the variety of autisms, the spectrum of all that stuff. And, my kids as well, a lot of friends, and the masking is so tough.
It is.
It's so exhausting, and it's just, kind of slowly wears you down and beats you up. And just having to put on that mask and act what you think is expected of you, whether or not it's just to get through your day at work, at school, with certain types of friends, etc., it really does wear down on you. But is that always your intention with Esther, struggling to sort of take off the mask, and how that would disrupt her world as the world that she finds herself in, and her connections to people? Was that always sort of the back of your mind, or was that something that just sort of was a natural evolution for you while you were writing it?
I think it was a natural evolution, and a revolution for her. It's hard to say. The writing process is a funny creature, because you can start off with an intention, and then you get into the process of writing something, and then you're like, that intention's not going to work. There's this other stuff that's happening that's a lot more interesting, right? And I always find too, I lay the groundwork for a story down, the basic blocks, and then I go in and find ways to make it more like I added all these characters in as Esther's friends, and then when you lay down the groundwork and you get that first draft done, you go in and you take those relationships with each other, and you find ways to create more tension in the story. There's this kind of implied or inferred romance between certain characters in the story that wasn't there in the initial draft, but it helped, that tension helped make the characters more human, more deep, give them more depth. And it really tied, and of course the trick is to make sure it ties into the main character's story arc.
Right.
That is in a way, because she is struggling to be seen, and she's in the limelight of her she's kind of in the shadow of her best friend, who's, she's a cheerleader, she is very fashionable, puts herself out there. And then she's also, so she's in the shadow of her best friend, and she doesn't mind. She doesn't mind that she is. But when you're there and you're trying to make a connection with someone else, and your best friend's in the way, that's a problem, right? And I think really worked out well for the story in showing Esther's kind of conflict, her inner conflict, and her inner struggle with being seen and not being seen.
Yeah, and then on top of it all, of course, you've got the backstory with Esther's, deadbeat dad who doesn't live with her. And I love the fact that, that could have almost been a whole story, and I'm sure that you could have added pages sort of talking about that, but it wasn't really necessary. But it was really cool because it tied into Esther's relationship with her mom, who I think her mom was really a well-meaning person, but also way overprotective of Esther. So that, of course, on top of it all, when she's trying to find herself, she almost has to do it sort of in secrecy away from this one big protector that she has, because a protector will prevent her from ultimately becoming, prevent her from essentially trying to find herself through better or for worse. So it was a really cool dynamic with her mom.
Yeah, there's nothing more relatable than that. Because I think all of us have gone through that, where we've had very protective parents, and the only way to like really figure out who we are as people is to go behind their backs and do these things without them knowing.
Right.
And it's just, it's part of our culture now, actually. Yeah.
It really is. And it's a friend of mine mentioned something about, what was it? Moral injuries, where, I think a lot of it, and I think I got that from Esther as well, in a relationship with her mom and having to kind of hide things and kind of lie. And in a way, she lies to her friend too, because her friend doesn't seem to really care about her too much. But she's there under the premise that she's, with her friend, but she doesn't say why she's really there and the feelings that she has. And I thought it's neat and of course that causes, I think, a lot of guilt, which no doubt causes a lot of the decision making that Esther does, because she seems to have all these moral, injuries where she does things because they're right for her, but she knows they're wrong for other people, because she shouldn't be sneaky behind their back and, being kind of devious. But at the same time, her deviousness is a means to the end to live right by her own values, which, again, they're constantly conflicting with each other. And, again, I thought that was a really cool, kind of juxtaposition that you have there.
Thank you.
So I mentioned before that, you think Halloween's all fun, but this story isn't necessarily all about fun and games. But what I thought was super fun in there, and we'll see if this works here to show this. If it doesn't, I'll just put some images up on it for everybody else. But through it all, this is a very interactive book, because you also have interspersed with this, I know that doesn't show up super duper well, like cool little articles that you have kind of throughout it all. And you've got stuff that, that Esther is even reading through, magazines. And I'm trying to find that page here right now, which I thought was just absolutely brilliant.
Which one was that?
I'm trying to find that one. It's like the Dead Times or something like that. I should have had this bookmark in advance.
Was it like Living Today?
Yes. Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this one here.
Yeah.
So I just love that you have that kind of stuff in there as well. So it really is, it's almost like an interactive book in a sense. But what I'm curious though is two questions about that is, I guess three questions, because I'd like to know, like, how much fun was that for you to put that in?
Tons of fun.
I could just imagine.
I love doing it. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Was that always the plan to do that initially, or?
No. I got to a point with the story and I was just like, how do I move the plot forward without actually having to write all this intermediary stuff that it's going to bore me to death? And then I thought, oh, okay, I'll just write a little newspaper article that explains that one of her friends has gone missing, right? And at the time, I just got a new iPad. I never worked on an iPad before, and I was using Procreate. And I just thought, oh, I'll give it a try. And I mocked up a little newspaper ad that looked like it had been torn out of a newspaper with that missing, and information about the person missing. And it was just that perfect thing to move the story forward without actually having to get into anything that I felt was going to be really boring. And then that led to me playing around with other different types of epistolary elements. Generally, epistolary fiction is letters and postcards, like handwritten
like
stuff.
Dracula and
like Dracula. And I've always enjoyed that about certain books. Like Dracula was by Bram Stoker was the very first book that I'd ever encountered epistolary elements in.
Yeah.
And then back in my 20s, when I was working for a company called National Book Service, they had a book in stock called, it was called Griffin and Sabine, An Extraordinary Correspondence.
It rings a bell, but I haven't read that.
Yeah, it's by an author called Nick Bantock. Yes, I looked it up because I knew I was never going to remember that.
So nice job.
And it's a picture book, and it's illustrated, and it's letters and postcards back and forth between two artists who have never met each other. And it was such a beautiful book. And I remember reading it. I'm like, "Ah, yeah, I got to do that one day, you know?" And then when I was reading House of Leaves by Mark Danielewski, which I still have not finished.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, as far as,
Yeah, he really went into different forms like of documentation. And it really made me rethink like all the different ways that I can like move the story forward without actually writing traditional prose.
Yeah.
And so that you got your magazine articles, and I included covers because I grew up in a time in the 70s where satire, I grew up with Mad Magazine and Cracked Magazine, and I thought I could have fun with that. Taking these spoofs of magazines, like Living Today is based on Canadian Living.
I don't know if you can see it over there. I've got one. Of course, there's a huge glare on it, but there's a Mad Zombie magazine right over there.
So Living Today is based on the Canadian Living magazine. Yeah. And so when I was making it up, I grabbed some Canadian Living cover art off the internet as a guide. And then I played around with, kind of adopted it to what was going on in this world in the book with the dead and the living. Because I had to do some world building, right? Yeah. So you have the dead. And I thought, well, what better way to present the rules of the universe, if you will, or the rules of the world verse. Yeah. I could do that in an article, and that was the article that I put together for the Living Today magazine. Because there's this list, like in the cover at the very top, right? You've got let's see if I can bring it up. You've got this little tag called "Live in the Now." Right? There's a little tagline at the top, and the little stuff like that just kind of adds to the world building and has these little social comments about the, I don't know, just about what's going on in the world right now, you know. I had to. It was fun, and yeah.
No, it was a lot of fun to read too, and it kind of took you away from the story a little bit. It was almost like you get these little these breaths, you know, in a sense from the main story, and then get back into it again. I mean, this page here that you even have, it says there's one of my favorite characters that you have in there as well is it's a dead cat named Mishu, which Mishu is not a nice kitty cat at all. And he obviously has his interactions with Esther are a little bit, or not a little bit, they're completely manipulative, where it seems like he's kind of cool with Esther and she's almost not necessarily befriended him, but they're cool, you know, they're okay with each other. And meanwhile, it's because he's trying to get Esther to do him a favor, which is not a very nice favor. And one of the pages you have here, where you actually have Esther, who makes a comment kind of regarding some of the stuff that she has there with me.
Actually, the comic is drawn by another character in the book.
Oh, okay. Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah. The comic strip is drawn by the young boy Luke Ritchie. He's the young boy they see coming across the street, and when they're walking back home from high school. And a young boy comes across, he's a ghoul. Yeah. And they recognize him. Like Rebecca recognizes him.
Right. Okay.
Who goes to church with, right?
Yeah.
And so that is the comic strip his mother found in his bedroom. And it's, yeah. So there's a lot of that with the documentation. Like For all the readers out there who are scanners, I think you'll probably miss a lot because there's a lot of nuance in this book, a lot.
Yeah.
So I don't recommend reading it quickly, or if you do read it quickly, stop and then read it again.
Exactly. And I mean, even just going through and reading just, you know, some of that stuff you have in there, like the magazine headlines, the artwork, and, you know, just everything that's kind of goes on in here. I find it's, even as I've got this, because of course I read this as originally as an electronic version of it, then you're kind enough to hook me up with this one, and then of course going through them all again and being able to see them in a little bit more vibrant detail is is really, really cool. And it definitely puts a lot more of a spin into things.
One of the challenges of doing epistolary fiction of this nature, I found, is that because I've had a friend ask me if I could do an audiobook of it, and I can do most of it. I can probably do 85-90% of it as audio, but there's a bunch of visual elements in this that made me realize when I was writing this book, I was writing it to be read.
Right.
It really needs to be read, just because of the imagery and the comic book, and not all of it can translate to audio.
There's maybe some of it, like the magazine articles. Maybe you could have like a radio broadcast or something in the background, or But
there's ways, but the comic strip, I have some ideas to how I could do that, but again, it would be an undertaking, and I'd have to do some extra writing to do the audio edition if I go down that road.
You'd almost need a companion book to go along with it or something, just so people get those key images.
Yeah.
But that'd be tough to pull off.
So that was a bit of a challenge there. I mean, doing epistolary fiction in general is challenging because, originally the story had a police report as well. But and so I had to make sure that all the dates, the timeline, where everybody was, that matched up, because I was going to have the police report be a little different from the investigator's report. Right. And then create that kind of what's really going on, what really happened, who's telling the truth, who's not telling the truth, right?
Yeah.
But one of my beta readers said that it was redundant, and and I gave it a lot of thought, and I thought, I know people probably aren't going to be paying that much attention, so I will take the police report out. Was it really necessary? And I kept investigators.
And it's kind of hinted at that anyways, I think, regarding that, because you do have the investigator's report in there, and that's kind of based on the general takeaway that the police are given, because everybody knows whatever there's any kind of, unless you're especially if you're a suspect, but I mean, unless you're in the know kind of thing and a part of a case, like they're not going to tell you anything anyway. So it's very frustrating. So then, of course, all you have, luckily she did. And I suppose that is the point, is that she got such little information from the police that they had this private investigator involved, so she can kind of figure out sort of what's really going on.
What really happened, yeah. But, doing that police report helped me, because that scene with Mrs. Chow and Esther and her mom, where Mrs. Chow is going over this police report, that was something I added after the fact. And when I added it in, I'm like, oh, I can actually quote some stuff from that police report that I wrote, and then get that legal stuff in there, so that people who are reading it will get a feel for just how much this situation they're in with the dead, how much it's changed their culture. That was really fun to do, was to figure out, the dead are here, they're staying, they don't like us looking like the living, they're going to bully us if we don't dress like them, or at least hide our livingness. How is that going to affect culture, right?
Right.
And then going into fashion, going into our media, the law, exploring all these facets. I could probably explore more and do another sequel or companion novel or something.
Oh, easily.
So it was fun to do.
I mean, even to the point that we've got the one, it was funny because as I was flipping through this, I found it, but where they ban revelry during Halloween, and all these, like you said, all these different laws that are changed. And
that was okay. So this is very telling. So when I was doing my research for Lefty, who is the soldier.
I was going to talk to you about him too.
Yeah, who hangs out in the cemetery. I was doing a lot of research on World War I, and I remembered, that was also the year of the Spanish flu, right? And I thought it would be really nice tie-in to pull in the fact that during the Spanish flu, people masked the way we did during the pandemic. Okay, which is again tying into the theme of masking, right? And I was doing research on Halloween for that year, I just stumbled across this article about Halloween in 1918, but it got banned in certain places in the States because of the Spanish flu and because of World War One.
That's
And
I mean, even like Coleman, it was almost banned.
yeah, so I thought it would be really good to bring that in somehow. And I wanted, because Hopetown's not a real Canadian town, it's a fictional Canadian town. And I wanted to give it some history. And I also wanted to tie in all these aspects of the book with Lefty being a soldier from World War One, the Halloween, the pandemic, the Spanish flu, masking. It just seemed like this really great article. And it took a long time to do. And I hate to say this, but I had a little help from AI with research and trying to capture the tone of the time, like in the writing. But AI is really great for that because you can tell it, can you just write a brief article in the tone, how they wrote back in 1918 and how it appeared in a small town newspaper. And it'll give you samples of that writing and you can just take that and mimic it. You can, sit there and do your own writing mimicking their sample without
that's the key for it.
Yeah.
And it's for inspiring, getting the ideas and putting them into your own voice. So folks watching this, that's how you use AI properly.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. I don't understand these people who are like using AI to generate drafts. Like I want to create actual synaptic neural networks in my brain. And the only way you do that is by developing skills.
Oh my God. I would hate to see like anybody think, hey, I'm going to write a book all about using AI, all about Halloween. Let's get AI to write that. There would be zero friggin' emotion involved in this. I mean, AI is all cerebral and it steals from other people and puts it all together, but being able to have that.
I was playing around with it and I not on this book, but just in general. And I was getting it to draft, like, because I heard stories that other writers were using it to draft their first drafts. So I would do it. And even with the few articles where I needed to, figure out the tone of the article, I found that AI just, at least the versions of AI that I use, they can't, it's repetitive, it repeats itself like I just did. It's the arrangement sometimes of the flow of ideas is just not there, and but it's helpful, it's a guide. It helped me like work a little bit faster. I certainly used it when I was writing the story blurb for my book. Yeah. I got it. I plugged in what I wanted it to say and it organized it. And I went through and went, this is no. But I like some of the concepts that came up. Yeah. They were a starting point. And then I would draft. I must have did 13 drafts of the story blurb on the back of the book. But I finally got around to it and getting feedback from AI and getting feedback from my husband. I got to a point where there's this thing when I write, I know I've nailed it when the prose sings to me. I can feel it buzzing in my body. And then that's when I know I got it. Yeah. So
that's cool. Sorry, I just realized that my book was in front of the camera there. Can I read the blurb?
Sure, go for it.
Cool?
Yeah.
So just for everybody else too. So this really encapsulates it really, really well, or captures it. So it says, once upon a Halloween, ghouls and ghosts came to play. The living, however, proved quite rude, so the dead conspired to stay. Now the dead scare the living into wearing costumes every single day, or else. I think that is brilliant. I love it.
So that I wrote myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got a little feedback because there was some words that weren't really working for me just yet. And that's what you have writer friends for, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So a shout out to Jen Frankel for helping me finalize that poem.
Awesome. Thank you, Jen. Yeah, no, that's beautiful. I really like that. One of the things that I did want to talk to you about as well, and I thought that was kind of fascinating, actually, even when you mentioned the soldier as well, and obviously did some research in there to make sure you got the dates were proper. One of the things that I found super fascinating is that you have the idea, obviously, of the dead coming in, to kind of, they don't really like the living, they don't like all these beautiful things, and I found that the general, or he was trying to remember now.
Lieutenant.
Lieutenant, thank you.
Yeah,
Lieutenant
or
Lefty.
lieutenant.
Yeah.
Lieutenant.
Yeah, Lefty. I know. I'm like, they need to, like, that just doesn't work for phonics or for my brain. But yeah, Lefty, I found he was a fascinating character, and he really took charge on sort of the whole idea of the living trying to live with the dead, where the living was there first, but like you said, they had to change their whole cultures, their laws, their attitudes, their approach, everything, where it was almost where the dead initially became the others, and very slowly you can sort of see that the thin line between their separation got a lot thinner, to the point where, you know, the living that was there before, they almost started to become like the others. And Lefty was, you know, watching them, observing them, and you realize, you know, slowly as it goes on, that you get this kind of really creepy sense where the people are being watched, not just because they're fascinating individuals, but almost the same way that you would maybe, I don't know, watch a new bug that you've never seen before to try to understand it and to find out, what can you do to crush this stupid bug? How do we make this bug like us? Or do we just need to get rid of this bug altogether, kind of thing? You know, and I thought that was, I don't know if that was your intention, but it was really creepy. And the way the Lefty's character really evolves, he's kind of an asshole, honestly. But he's just got, and it's not nice. But I mean, Esther has a bit of a relationship with him as well that is, it's complicated. If they were friends on Facebook, their relationship status would be complicated.
Yeah. And you know, there's a section in the book where Esther goes to do research at the Historical Society, and she learns about Lefty, like when he was alive. And I really hope that research, because as much as Lefty is an asshole, there's a reason for it. It's not just because that's who he is. He was a soldier in the World War I. He fought to save lives, like to save people, he fought for freedom. And then, I don't want to really give away too much more, but it's an important element in the book, right? So, and then he did all these heroic things, but in order to do those heroic things, he had to be a pretty nasty person. You know, that's kind of like that ambivalent zone, there's that paradox there that happens with you know, being a fighter. You could be the nicest person, but in order to go and kill another person, you have to have a part of you that isn't nice. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you got to do terrible things to do good.
Yeah.
For the better good, whether it's good or not, obviously, is always up for interpretation. But in his mind, and as you go on to the very ending of the book as well, I'm not going to talk about it because I definitely don't want to give that away. But I found that as it goes along, Esther, she very slowly starts to reveal a little bit more of her true self. She's kind of had enough of this crap, and she is rebellious, but there's a cost to pay for everything. There's a cost for her to pay to reveal her Halloween mask to her true self, which also has its own proverbial mask attached to it. And the more that she loosens that, there's more that she's kind of giving up. There's a price for that. And the price gets bigger as of course she goes along. But then at the very end of it, it really is a chef's kiss. Like, it just kicked me right in the feels for this. It's just like true poetry, you know. It's just beautiful and ugly and sad and, you know, amazing. And frankly, I really couldn't imagine the story ending any other way. I very confident in saying that folks that read this are not going to suspect exactly how the story is going to end. I think they'll be very surprised, and I think it's going to make them want to, you know, go back and kind of pick up on all those nuances as well, and read it again. Certainly, I've read the very ending a couple of times, and it's just beautiful. Did you know how it was going to end when you started off? Because it almost seems like the ending was so bloody perfect that I wouldn't be surprised if you told me you wrote the ending first and then everything else kind of led up to that moment.
Like all stories, when I'm writing, I like to have a general idea where the character's going to land. I don't know the details, but I could see the scene in my head. I just didn't see all the little threads leading up to it. And then when I did finally write that scene, I had to let it sit for a while because I got the basic scene blocked out, like in the cemetery of everything that goes down in there. And then the absolute very end was something that it was like you said, like your chef's reference, it was like the icing on the cake. Mm-hmm. It was like a final flourish that kind of just fell into place after I had set everything else down first. And then I was just like, bing, and I was like, that's it. That's that final brushstroke, basically, or icing stroke, whatever you want to call it when you're like decorating a cake.
Yeah, it's a fondant.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't see that until you've got everything else in place, right? At least that's what happens for me sometimes. Is I don't see the full picture until I've got the basic elements down first, and then I start seeing the threads that kind of pull everything together.
Yeah, and I found it really interesting that it is a book about Halloween, about the dead, and all these, I guess, creatures, because there's even, flowers that come back from the dead in there as well. And they're ultimately, the monsters that are kind of being haunted by their own deaths, because there's nothing that they can really do about that. But then in the end, I found that the most haunting person was Esther, who was just striving so much just to simply be alive. But what she leaves us with and how she completes her story, I found, is the most haunting aspect of this entire book. So again, everybody, I'm going to be putting the link down below, so you can check out Kit as well. She's got an awesome website, so that'll link in with all of her other wonderful things that she writes, including this book as well. The nice thing is, as the title suggests, it doesn't have to be Halloween for you to enjoy this book.
No.
As a matter of fact, you'll certainly look at Halloween a lot differently, and I think look at your window a lot differently too after reading this book. Thank you very much for writing the book and for chatting about it.
Thank you for having me, Rick. This was fun.
Yeah, no, this has been a lot of fun. One other thing I want to talk to you about, I don't know if this is like the most positive way that we can end the conversation, if you don't mind talking about this, Kit, because I think it's really important, speaking of mass, to kind of, springboard off of, kind of what the guts are at the core of the story here, is sometimes, again, there's a cost to pay for being who you truly are. And it's up to you, obviously, it's an individual decision to decide if those costs are worth it. As somebody that's had to make those decisions too, I think it's absolutely worth it. However, that said, I want to tie that in. And don't look too nervous. I'm not going to go too much and start talking about your childhood or anything like that. I don't have a notebook to write down your inner thoughts here as you tell them to me. But I know you've made a pretty big decision lately too, where you've, like all of us or many of us writer people have done, where you have ambitions where you kind of see yourself with the whole writing thing, at least making enough that maybe that's all you have to do is just write full time in that. And I know you've made a decision fairly recently, I think, although I know it wasn't a rash decision, something that you've probably been weighing pretty heavily on you for quite a while, where you've kind of made the decision is, amazing as your writing is, you're finding that it's just not necessarily something that you can kind of bank your retirement on, at least technically. And I'm trying to put that in a way that it's very general, because I don't want to try to speak for you, obviously, and I'm not sure how much you want to share about what went into that decision. But can you maybe, are you cool with talking a little bit about that as far as...
Yeah, absolutely.
That I think a lot of people that are watching this, kind of like it when the fourth wall is broken, and also for people here watching this that are also writers themselves, or, endeavoring with any kind of creative anything that, they think that the mark of success is financial, no matter how much talent you may or may not have. So I'll put the table for you, please.
Well, I'm going to say something that is probably going to upset a lot of writers, okay? Yeah. And that is talent alone does not ensure success, especially not financial success.
Yep.
And it does not assure awards, and it does not assure readers, because you can be a really good writer, but if your stories are not landing with anyone, it's not going to matter, because people remember the stories. They remember how they feel when they read a book. And I'm not saying that my readers aren't feeling something. That's not my point. The point is that I'm having difficulty finding my readers. Okay. I don't write to market. I have no desire to write to market. I write in specific genres that appeal to me. And I also know that if I can't explore as a writer and experiment as a writer, I don't want to do this thing that's called writing. Right. And I think where I've come to is that over the past 2.5 years, I've been dealing with a lot of health issues, dealing with a chronic insomnia. I don't have the energy I used to anymore. And I spend more time on the business side of writing than actually writing. And I don't make enough to justify that. So my decision, and I didn't come to it lightly, as you said, it was that I'm going to be stepping back into doing less business and more writing, because there are some stories I want to say, like, tell before I die. And people can read them or they don't. I'm at a point where I don't care anymore. I will do my best to make sure that I can optimize discoverability for my books, but I can't make people buy them. I can't make people read them.
Sure.
Right. And I'm at a point where I'm exhausted all the time, and I do not want to destroy this thing that I love, that I've always been doing since I was a kid, which is writing. And having said that, I've given a kind of a deadline on the business side of things. And if things aren't where I want them to be, then I will be shutting down the business side of writing, and I will just continue to write and publish. And that's it. I will be marketing. I will be filling out tax reports at the end of the year or anything. It'll be just like supplemental income, right? All the little busyness that happens from running a business, which you know, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just too much. It's too much for me anyway. It might change going down the road. I might get healthier again. I don't know. It's difficult to say, but I am getting older. I've never had a lot of energy as a person, even when I was younger.
Sure.
And it's a lot more than I thought it was going to be indie, but I'm still indie. Yeah. I'm still for being independent. I just might do it a little differently going forward, and definitely not the way other people are doing it.
Right.
Yeah. Did I answer your question?
No, absolutely. And I think, and I hope that the takeaway from that too isn't that people should just go and, give up their dreams and, I don't know, go burn all their old writing and stuff. I think that you absolutely nailed it. And I full-heartedly agree with that. I'm in kind of a weird flux of a position as well. I talked to you a little bit about that before the camera got rolling, where I'm going to be doing a shift in things as well. They always say in business, you should stay close to stay close to the money. Whoever's making you money, focus on that kind of thing. But I'm in a position as well where I'm like, back to the cost of getting that money, is it really worth it as far as everything else goes? And like, that's a decision for me personally, not really. For a little bits that you've made, it sounds like not really.
Yeah. I mean, if you're not breaking even, like if I was breaking even, I would be gung-ho still about it, but I'm not breaking even. I haven't broken even since, I've been at this probably 12 or 13 years. The last time I broke even was my first year. Yeah, I think. I don't even, and it wasn't, and
then that's probably because you just didn't know enough to know all the different business angles that you could take, and which of course costs money and everything else. And
right, and you're doing a lot of investment upfront too, right? In what you're doing. However,
if you do it proper, you do. If you're not just kind of throwing whatever up on, KDP, Kindle Direct Publishing, where I could write, Jack is a doll, is a doll boy kind of thing, and they'll publish it because I'm publishing it. However, to do it proper, you have to invest, and you have to invest as you've done with a proper editor, with a, you're very handy with putting some great covers together.
Yeah.
I'm not. So, you got to get, I mean, even that little travel book that I did that you edited for me not too long ago, I'm not here to promote that, but, even that little thing took so much time and energy and work. It was unbelievable because, luckily you're a friggin' genius when it comes to laying out books. And by the way, anybody that wants to, does write and needs a book laid out as well.
I love formatting books.
Yeah, and you're so good at it. I mean, it's just say for everything from like making the little titles in each one of my little travel stories stand out, look friggin' phenomenal, and getting all the pictures to fit, and the text was, I can't say enough about that, was brilliant. But the point of that though is that it's a lot of friggin' work, and it's a lot of money. I mean, I paid for my cover artists because that's what you should do. Unless you're an amazing artist, or you're married to an artist, or you're very good, which you're both of those boats. Pay for a cover artist; it's worth it. If you can't do it yourself, and you have to pay for an editor, otherwise you're just going to put garbage out there and just add to the, honestly, the cesspool that is, and the bad reputation that self-publishing has. So don't be that person. And
I just have to say something, and you're probably going to hate me for this. There were some errors in the book that I've corrected over the past month, like typos and stuff like that. And there were some formatting issues that I noticed that probably
in your book.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you noticed or not. Okay.
No,
but
I didn't.
I cleaned them up.
Okay.
In your opinion, do you feel the prose was concise and solid, and like had fluency, and there was no causality issues or continuity issues? Did you feel it was a pretty solid story?
Oh, talk about spinning around the spotlight and put me on the spot, why don't you? No, I did. No, I didn't notice like the continuity of it all worked really well. I didn't feel like anything was kind of shuffled around. Maybe you wrote a scene here because that's what you thought of, or you maybe inserted another scene here that you wrote after the fact. If you did, it was seamless. I didn't notice that.
Okay.
And the cool thing that I really liked about having, the various things like this kind of, interspersed as well, is that where there was a few points where it started, what's the word I'm looking for? Introspective, where Esther was being very introspective and kind of talking about how things were impacting her. From some of the more action and more dynamic scenes of this, where there was a lot of cool things happening and evolving. Before it got too monotonous with Esther, all of a sudden the next chapter would start with something like this. So I was like, oh, that's cool. So it's,
right.
Kind of had that nice little ebb and flow sort of, having the inserts in there as well was really cool. And I think that really helped a lot for the pace. And I think if you didn't have that in there, some of the more introspective sections might have been a little bit more drier. And I'm only saying that because compared to how things were evolving and the excitement and everything and the interaction with, with the dead and Mishu, the dead cat, and things like that, I think might have been a bit drier, but then having that in there, it kind of gave a little bit of extra sprucing up a little bit, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, like everyone has their different levels of tastes, right? Like some people like things that are deep, and other people like a little less deep. And that's fair. But the point I'm trying to get across here is that I had 2 beta readers help me with this, and that's it.
Wow. I know, and I feel bad too. I should let everybody know as well that I was going to be one of those beta readers, and I just had so much stuff up in the air, my head up my butt, that I didn't get a chance to. So I will apologize publicly for that. I know I said that to you last time we chatted, but obviously you didn't need me because this thing worked.
So. Well, the thing is that I had to get really like my beta readers, I love them. They were able to go through the book several times with me.
That's good.
Okay. But I also had to put the book down a little bit and then come back to it. And come back to it with an objective eye, because I knew I was not going to be able to afford an editor on this one. I needed to get it done. When I was writing this book, I have to explain something. So when I was writing this book, I was dealing with health issues, a lot of insomnia, chronic pain. And then when I started in the editing process, which was about the summer, that was about the time that I found out my mom had cancer. Yeah. And then by the time I was finished editing and I had the first proof, I actually had the proof sent to Nova Scotia because I was going out to see her and visit with her for the last time. Yeah. And I was out there for about 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, I think, before I came home, and then shortly after she passed away. So through the summer, I was under the pressure of making sure that I finished the story, because if I didn't, I knew I wouldn't finish it. And then the stress of being possibly having to like get up and go to Nova Scotia and come back. There was a lot of uncertainty about the time, like with my mom and stuff like that. And so I was under a lot of pressure while I was editing as well. And I never, ever, ever want to go through that again. Right. But I'm still stunned at how well it came out, even with the handful of errors that were in it that I saw, like just typos, basically, that got missed by everybody, which happens. But I really hope that it's not enough that it's going to deter anyone from wanting to read the book.
No, I don't think so at all. It didn't jar me away from it. And I mean, when I'm reading an electronic copy of it too, that was before I think you did the final copy. I mean, there's always going to be some typos and stuff in it too. I've read ARCs for a long time, so I mean, I never hold that against anybody. It's not the final copy.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, it was a really tough project to work on, but at the same time, it was fun. And yeah, I'm kind of proud of it, because I mean, I'm sure it could benefit from having a professional editor edit it. But I kind of like it the way it is. You know?
No, it's brilliant. And yeah, no, I didn't notice anything as far as the continuation of it, the general flow of it. I thought was very good. And again, especially with that, having those inserts in there, that made a big difference. It just made it really fun and exciting.
But that's how I work. I work on my writing the same way I worked on the blurb. I go over it until it sings, right? I think there's a writer that works that way too. God, he's a big horror writer. He's not Stephen King. It's damn it, I can't remember his name.
And what does he do? Sorry.
He's a horror writer. I don't think he's in favor right now anymore. Okay. He did. Oh, damn it, my brain. It'll come to me. Yeah.
And sorry, what's the connection? So he reads out loud as well?
I think he writes the same way I write. Yeah, okay. And he will go over a page and keep going over a page until it's just perfect, and then he moves on to the next page, and then he does that again.
Well, I know Joe Lansdale does that, where he does. So he'll generally start off his day where he'll edit. He says, I mean, now he's got the luxury, but I don't think it's changed much over the years. Where he'll have a very set amount of time where he'll write, and then that's it. He's kind of done with it for the day. But he'll write a section of a story. It might be a chapter or 6 pages or whatever. And then his next writing session will be he'll go through and edit what he already did before he goes on to write the next little bit. I couldn't do that. I think that would drive me, just the way that my own brain works. I just I have to get it down. Otherwise it just becomes too overwhelming for me, and then I'll never finish it.
Yeah. Well, this is how I figure out the more nuanced threads that most people probably don't even notice. But I enjoy doing that, making these little minor juxtapositions of information in the story that kind of add a little extra resonance, with the thematic resonance. And yeah, it's difficult to explain, but
read it. That's all the explanation people need. So, no, great. And what do you hope people ultimately get away from this? Like, what is it when you wrote this, when you thought, other than entertaining people, because you want people to read your books and have some kind of a feeling, as opposed to reading and just going, yeah, nobody wants that sensation. But is there anything particular where you're like, if this person walks away feeling this or thinking that, nailed it?
Yeah. Well, I really wanted to write something that was about Halloween, that was quirky, fun, had some psychological depth to it, because I like psychological depth in fiction and stories. I sometimes don't think there's enough of it. Yeah. And if anything, they walk away feeling a little disturbed or a lot disturbed. And it gives them something to talk about. Because when I handed off the manuscripts to my beta readers, this is the first book that I've given to them where they both could not stop talking about everything that they loved in the book. It was like, like my husband, he was going on and on and on about all the kind of the social relevance in it to what's going on in our world today. And he got to a point where he ran out of breath, and he's like, really do it. He said,
oh, yeah.
And the same thing with my other beta reader as well. She had a lot. She just loved it. Absolutely loved it. And out of everything I've written, it's their favorite. To answer your question, I hope it gives them something to talk about, and it gives them a way to look at what's going on in our world right now and give them a kind of a little bit of a different perspective.
Yeah, and I hope that you get this book as well. And I don't know if you have already, if you're planning on it, what have you, with this registered with the Library of Congress as well, so the libraries can kind of pick it out, because I know our library is fantastic, and they actually have book bundles specific to book clubs. And this would just make such a cool book club book as well, to, like you said, to be discussed. And I mean, it's there's, like you said, there's a lot of relevance in there, and it doesn't necessarily answer all the questions, but it certainly gives you a lot of what if possibilities, depending on what direction you might go in, or maybe the rest of our world. And I think this be good fit for any book club.
Okay, I'll have to look into that.
Yeah,
thank you.
You're welcome. So, all right, well, thank you very much, Kit. This has been absolutely a complete blast. And and hopefully I'm not going to say the last rites as well, because I don't want Johnny over there to kind of come to life and wake up on us here. But it's a bad joke. I've been waiting to say that all podcast.
And just in case everybody thinks that I'm using last rites in the wrong way, I do address the semantic shift that happens in the book with that term, where it becomes something that a rite that you give to people as they're dying, to something that becomes more all-encompassing, and it is about what happens after death as well. But it does get explained in the story. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you for mentioning that as well. For the people that are going by and sharpening up their their spears and getting out the pitchforks and coming after you, it's okay.
Thanks for having me, Rick. This was fun.
1000%. Thank you again, Kit. And good luck on the rest of the writing. So I'm glad that you're not giving up on that. You're going to still write for people. You're going to get the words, and you've always been one of those authors too, where I thought, if talent meant success, then I'm angry on your behalf that you're not quite there as far as that success goes. So I'm glad that you found a way to balance things out for yourself so you can keep writing. Thank you very much, Kit.
Okay, see ya.